News World News Program. I'm your host Islam Said, and up next are tonight's top stories. Gaza faces multiple crises. Hunger, bombs and cold take lives as the UN warns of catastrophe, while settlement expansion threatens Palestinian communities. In Sudan, the army strikes RSF in West Kordofan. Committee probes Darfur crimes, and the United Nations Security Council tackles the fallout. Also in our news, France is in turmoil. Protests over foreign policies, budget crisis deepens, and new Chinese tariffs threaten bankruptcy waves. And later on, Ukraine peace talks crawl amid mutual blame and ground tensions rise as military leaders are targeted. Welcome back. Great to have you with us tonight. First off in our news, 2 Palestinians, including a woman, were killed and 3 others injured overnight by fire from the Zionist occupation east of Gaza City. Palestinian media say intensive airstrikes hit the Tufah and Shujaiya neighborhoods, killing a woman and a young man and wounding several others. Meanwhile, ceasefire violations continued, with shelling reported in Rafah and Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. The Director General of the World Health Organization warns that by mid-next year, more than 100,000 children and 37,000 pregnant women in Gaza could face acute malnutrition. In a post on X platform, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said efforts to prevent famine remain extremely fragile, citing widespread infrastructure destruction, the collapse of livelihoods, decline in local food production, and restrictions on humanitarian aid.
This welcome progress remains extremely fragile as the population continues to struggle with massive infrastructure destruction, collapsed livelihoods, and local food production and restrictions imposed on humanitarian operations. Over 100,000 children and 37,000 pregnant or breastfeeding women are still projected to suffer acute malnutrition through April next year.
Rescue operations continue across Gaza Strip. After more than a year and a half of bloody genocide, many Palestinian bodies have been recovered from the rubble, with local authorities warn that thousands of families still have loved ones trapped beneath debris. Karim Mustafa reports now.
The residents of Gaza keep facing the devastating consequences of the Zionist aggression that lasted for more than 2 years. Here in Khan Yunis, civil defense teams could recover the remains of 4 siblings from beneath the debris after their home was hit in June 2024. The children could only be identified by the clothes they were wearing.
They were able to pull out my cousin's children. She wouldn't stop crying and calling out for her children. Thankfully, today she will finally be able to bury them.
Meanwhile, local authorities report that the number of families whose loved ones are still trapped under the rubble runs into thousands. In Al Amal neighborhood alone, at least 55 people are believed to still be missing under the debris of bombed buildings.
Under the rubble, there are my brother-in-law, his wife, and their 2 daughters. One of their daughters survived the bombing.
The rescue operations are expected to be massive as they cover the entire devastated enclave. However, the severe shortage of resources is likely to slow the recovery efforts.
We resumed researches on Saturday. We have many destroyed houses to inspect. We have 13 houses in Al Amal neighborhood. There is a severe lack of resources, so we had to run this machine.
It's worth recalling that according to Gaza Health Ministry, the death toll has reached 70,937 since the start of the Zionist offensive on October 7, 2023. The number of martyrs is expected to increase as more bodies are pulled from under the rubble.
A Palestinian Authority Commission is warning that new Zionist settlement construction in the occupied West Bank constitutes a war of extermination against Palestinian land. The Commission Against the Wall and Settlements states this dangerous expansion aims to entrench annexation, apartheid, and the complete Judaization of the territory. It affirms that the Zionist decision is a blatant challenge to international law and warns of a systematic colonization process to eradicate the Palestinian presence, transforming cities and villages into besieged enclaves.
The approval by the so-called Israeli occupation cabinet of the establishment of 19 new settlements across the occupied West Bank constitute another step in the race to erase the Palestinian geography in favor of the colonial settlement project. The decision constitutes a blatant challenge to the international law and to the UN Security Council resolutions, particularly Resolution 2334, and sounds the alarm about the future of the West Bank.
Zionist occupation forces carried out a wide campaign of raids and arrests across towns and villages in the occupied West Bank on Monday. According to the Palestinian news agency, 18 Palestinians were detained during operations in Ramallah, Al-Bira, Tulkaram, Qalqaliyya, and Al-Khalil. Still with the Middle East developments, 3 Lebanese citizens were killed in a drone strike by the Zionist occupation in the Sidon district on the southern country. Lebanon's Ministry of Health said an occupation drone targeted a car on the Qanitara road, killing all 3 passengers inside. Moving on to the war in Sudan, the Sudanese army carried out drone strikes on several towns in West Kordofan on Monday, where rapid support forces fighters are deployed. Media citing a military source said that the attacks destroyed several armored vehicles and neutralized RSF elements in Abu Zabad, Abu Qalb, and Al-Mahfoura. The UN Human Rights Office says more than 1,000 civilians were killed by the rapid support forces at the Zamzam displacement camp in North Darfur between April 11 and 13. In its latest report, the office said over 300 people were executed while trying to flee. Others were killed inside their homes and in public places, including markets, schools, health facilities, and mosques. An Arab committee linked to the Arab Lawyers Union has launched field investigations into crimes and violations committed by the rapid support forces against civilians in Darfur. The committee has taken testimonies from displaced people in several areas to document the abuses and collect evidence with the aim of submitting a detailed report to international human rights bodies.
This commission has done an enormous amount of work investigating the crimes of the militias and has already heard from several victims. Now, with their visit, which we welcome, they will meet more victims and document those crimes.
The Sudanese government has given a detailed briefing to the Arab League's Commission of Inquiry on crimes and violations committed by the rapid support forces in several cities across the country. After meeting the Commission's delegation, Justice Minister Abdullah Darf said his ministry shared documented data on crimes against humanity that have been committed and are ongoing. He also praised the Commission's efforts to legally document RSF violations.
For the past 2 years, we've been working on documenting these crimes, particularly in Western Sudan, in Darfur. Today we believe it's our obligation to continue this documentation and to investigate direct evidence. Being on the ground in Sudan allows our team to see reality firsthand and to collect testimonies from the victims themselves.
The UN Security Council held a briefing on Monday to discuss developments in Sudan. Speaking at a UN Security Council meeting on the situation in Sudan and South Sudan, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Hamar bin Jama, stressed that only an inclusive, Sudanese-led political dialogue, supported by coordinated international mediation under the African Union and the United Nations, can lead to a lasting peace.
The solution to the conflict cannot be reached only through the use of force. Only inclusive dialogue and genuine negotiation can lead to a durable solution. Only that is Sudanese-led and Sudanese-owned, and enjoying support from the broader international community. There has to be a space for international diplomacy, for international mediation, to bridge the positions and views in full respect of the national sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Sudan, with the single legitimate government.
Turning to other news, the International Organization for Non-Violence says it is committed to strengthening global solidarity with the Sahrawi people and defending their right to self-determination. In a statement Sunday, the group's programs coordinator, Bianca Barakji, said continued violations by the Moroccan occupation in Western Sahara make the protection of civilians an urgent international responsibility.
The International Non-Violence Organization affirms that ongoing Moroccan violations in the occupied Sahara make civilian protection an urgent international responsibility and renews its commitment to defending the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination and independence.
Back home, Algerian Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines, Mohamed Arqab, met with the CEO of China's Anton Group on Monday. A ministry statement says the CEO expressed the group's interest in strengthening its presence in Algeria through long-term partnerships. He cited a focus on sustainable projects that use the latest technologies to develop the national hydrocarbon sector. Samir Bakhti, head of Algeria's National Agency for the Valorization of Hydrocarbon Resources, confirmed positive signs of hydrocarbon reserves in the country's offshore waters. In an interview with All 24 News TV, Bakhti said U.S. company Chevron requested a study on oil and gas exploration and drilling off the Algerian coast, despite the risks involved in launching offshore operations at this stage.
Another study carried out in partnership with the Chevron Institute focuses on offshore exploration in the region. Algeria launched the project based on its strong belief in the significant potential of its offshore resources. The fact that major companies are investing substantial amounts in research alone underscores the promising prospects for exploration and the development in Algeria's offshore sector.
And as you followed in our headlines, French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is holding consultations with political parties to resolve the 2026 budget deadlock after both parliamentary houses failed to approve a unified text. Over the past week, Lecornu has sought a solution ahead of Monday's cabinet meeting where urgent legislation may be introduced to ensure state operations continue in January until a formal budget is adopted. The Socialist Party reiterated its rejection of the proposed austerity budget. Party leader Olivier Faure criticized the rush in passing the plan, questioning its content and fairness.
Donc plus de justice fiscale.
We want more tax justice and to avoid in the second part of the finance bill any cuts that would affect public services and essential public policies. We're not here just to please the government, nor are we here to patch up a government we know is already struggling. That's why we will fight, as we did regarding the Social Security financing bill, in service of the French people, because this is our duty and the mandate we have received.
Dozens of French and Belgian farmers blocked highways at the border on Monday, protesting government policies that mandate the mass slaughter of cattle infected with lumpy skin disease. The protesters are demanding the French government adopt vaccination programs instead. Farmers have vowed to escalate their demonstrations in the coming days, threatening to spend the end-of-year holidays in the streets in protest.
The purpose of the blockade is to support French farmers affected by the pandemic who oppose mass slaughter and support vaccinating their herds. We're present at the border point, which is a major crossing point for goods coming from the ports of Rotterdam and Antwerp and Eastern European countries, and therefore it is also a joint operation with our Belgian colleagues. We really need to mobilize because this is unacceptable. What's happening now isn't normal. I think think it will require a national revolution, and that's the only way to do it.
Voilà, il n'y a pas le choix et moi je suis tout cœur avec eux.
My parents were farmers before I was a child. My grandparents were farmers before them. So we want to continue, and our children will be farmers too.
French dairy producers warned of a looming threat to the industry after China announced plans to impose temporary tariffs of up to 42% on certain EU dairy imports. Reuters reported that French Dairy Federation's Director General said the move could hit the country's cheese industry hard, particularly its renowned varieties amid a broader economic crisis worsened by the government's failure to pass next year's budget. Looking Eastern Europe now, Russian authorities reported the death of a Russian army general in a car bombing in Moscow on Monday. The Federal Investigative Committee said General Vanil Sarvarov, head of the Operational Training Directorate of the Russian General Staff, was killed. Officials suggested Ukrainian agents may have planted the explosive device.
The crime scene investigation is ongoing. Investigators will carry out the necessary tests, including forensic and explosive analysis, interview eyewitnesses, review surveillance footage, and examine various accounts of the crime, one of which involves the possible involvement of Ukrainian intelligence agencies in orchestrating it.
Moscow reported slow progress in talks with the United States on a plan to end the war in Ukraine on Monday. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov criticized what he described as malicious attempts by unnamed influential countries to undermine the negotiations following weekend talks in Miami.
We are witnessing slow progress. This is accompanied by highly damaging and extremely malicious attempts by a group of influential countries to obstruct these efforts and derail the diplomatic process. The Trump administration is showing a willingness to develop solutions that address the root causes of the war and are sustainable. This is what our opponents in Brussels and a number of European capitals fear. I believe they cannot even dream, in their worst nightmares, of the outcomes we are seeking to achieve. We will continue moving forward in this direction without any retreat.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said talks with the United States on a peace agreement in Miami are progressing constructively. In a press briefing, Zelensky confirmed that both delegations are reviewing every single clause of the documents and discussing timelines for specific decisions to end the war.
Ukraine's negotiating team is currently working in Florida. There will be more meetings today with the American delegation with envoys of US President Donald Trump. Work on the document on ending the war, on security guarantees, and on reconstruction is ongoing. They are going through each point in detail, and there is a constructive engagement with the American side. This is important.
The Kremlin has refuted a Reuters report citing U.S. intelligence which claimed President Vladimir Putin seeks to take full control of Ukraine and reclaim former Soviet territories. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that Moscow does not know the reliability of the sources, but he asserted, if accurate, the U.S. intelligence conclusions are completely wrong.
We have examined various reports on this topic, including Reuters articles citing US intelligence and other sources. However, even if these reports are accurate, they represent cases where intelligence agencies have failed in their analyses and conclusions. As such, the assertion is completely erroneous and unfounded.
Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said on Monday that Russia has no plans to attack the European Union or NATO. Speaking to the official RIA Novosti news agency, Ryabkov added that Moscow is willing to formalize this commitment through a legally binding agreement.
Large-scale armament programs have been launched in Europe under the pretext of an alleged threat from Russia. The European Union is preoccupied with the illusions of preparing for a supposed Russian attack. Russia is ready to legally prove that it has no intention of attacking the European Union or NATO.
Switching focus to another global news story now. Tensions are rising in the Caribbean after the United States launched a surveillance operation against a Venezuelan oil tanker accused of evading sanctions, an escalation Caracas condemns as a violation of its sovereignty and a bid to reassert U.S. regional dominance. More on this story with Yasin Urkti.
The latest episode in the long-running standoff between Washington and Caracas comes as the U.S. steps up monitoring in the Caribbean. The targeted Venezuelan tanker is accused of trying to bypass sanctions, a practice forced by Washington's 2019 embargo that has pushed Venezuela to sell oil mainly to Asia at discounted prices.
We are used to such sanctions from other countries like the United States. We are Venezuelans. We always make through, at least for me, I'm not afraid, really. Even if it's a naval blockade, no matter what we encounter, we will find a way to make it through.
The U.S. action has sparked international criticism. China called it a serious violation of international law, denouncing unilateral sanctions and defending Venezuela's right to trade freely.
The arbitrary detention of vessels from other nations by the US side constitutes a serious violation of international law. China opposes any actions that violate the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter and infringe upon the sovereignty and security of other countries. China understands and supports Venezuela's stance in safeguarding its legitimate rights and interests.
Iran also condemned the move as a blatant violation, warning that such unilateral actions threaten global peace and security.
The action the United States is taking against Venezuela and some other Latin American countries is a blatant violation of all these principles and a very dangerous turn toward unilateralism, with no regard for the rules and principles of international law. Any deference or disregard towards such a law breaking will have consequences for all countries and for international peace and security.
Germany, meanwhile, urged restraint from both sides, stressing that the dispute should be resolved directly between Washington and Caracas.
Overall, we have no interest in seeing the situation escalate and become even more intense. On the contrary, we have an interest in seeing the situation calm down. In our view, it goes without saying that international law must be observed. Ultimately, however, as we have already said, these are issues that need to be discussed bilaterally, particularly between the United States of America and Venezuela.
Earlier this week, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro accused the U.S. of trying to seize the country's oil resources. For Washington, the Caribbean remains a strategic zone for energy, security, and regional influence. The U.S. insists its increased naval presence is part of anti-drug efforts, a claim Venezuela rejects. Observers warn the show of force raises the risk of a maritime incident and deepens diplomatic tensions in an already fragile region.
To other news, the Nigerian government said on Monday that it had resolved its recent diplomatic dispute with the United States after President Donald Trump threatened military action over alleged attacks on Christians. Information Minister Mohammed Idris confirmed at a year-end press conference that the issue was largely settled through serious and respectful dialogue.
The recent diplomatic dispute with the United States has largely been resolved through serious, respectful dialogue, culminating in the strengthening of the partnership between the United States and Nigeria.
China's foreign ministry said on Monday that it lodged a diplomatic protest with Japan over a visit to Taiwan by a senior Japanese ruling party official. Spokesman Lin Jian said China strongly opposes the visit and has formally protested, urging Japan to reflect on what it called a serious mistake.
China strongly opposes a high-ranking Japanese ruling party official's visit to Taiwan and has lodged official protests with Japan, urging Tokyo to seriously reconsider its mistake.
And now let's catch up on more international news stories on the News in Brief with Salman Asseb and Sofian Kantari.
Ukrainian intelligence announced on Monday that drones struck the military airport near Lipetsk, about 200 kilometers south of Moscow, setting two Sukhoi fighter jets on fire. At the same time, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that its northern forces had taken control of the town of Vilcha in Kharkiv and reinforced positions along the front line in Donetsk.
The Iranian military began large-scale missile tests across multiple regions including Khorramabad, Mahabad, Isfahan, Tehran and Mashhad. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baqai confirmed the missile program is defensive and non-negotiable, condemning what he called the double standards as massive weapons continue flowing to Israel.
Copenhagen condemned the U.S. appointment of a special envoy to Greenland and said it will summon the Washington ambassador in protest. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen called the appointment of Republic Governor Jeff Landry unacceptable. EU spokesperson Anwar al-Anouni stressed that Denmark's territorial integrity, including Greenland, must be upheld, noting this is a long-standing EU position.
Thai Foreign Minister announced on Monday that talks to resume the ceasefire with Cambodia will take place this week. He said officials from both countries are set to meet next Wednesday and welcome a resumption of negotiations.
That wraps up our news program for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Islam Sid signing off. Thank you for watching. Do take care.